Hello, I'm Miss Kilburn Bond and I work for the Athelston Trust. I work with all the English departments in the schools within the Trust. And in this video, I'm talking about the English Language Paper 2. I'm going to talk to you about question 3. So if you've missed the first two videos where I talk about question 1 and 2, you might want to go back and see those, especially because in question 1 I actually read through the sources that we're going to be focusing on. However, this video should work as a standalone. It just means that you won't have had the opportunity to hear the whole source read aloud. So, the objective to this video and to the others is to help you understand the overall format of the GCSE English Language Paper 2 and revise the priorities for each question so you're really clear about what's important that you cover in the time you've got, and help you develop a strategy that you can then apply to each answer. And we're going to focus on question 3 as part of section A, which is obviously all about the reading. So here's question 3 in front of you now. You now need to refer only to source B from lines 1 to 8. How does the writer use language to describe her excitement about Christmas? And this is worth 12 marks. So this question's only going to be about one of the sources, so that's important. And what you do need to notice straight away is it's actually not just only about one source, it's about a tiny bit of that one source. In this example, it's just lines 1 to 8. So if you start talking about line 10, or line 15 or line 22, unfortunately the examiner is going to notice and those parts of your answer would not get you any credit. So the first thing to say is read the question carefully. I would suggest you get out a highlighter or a pencil or something and you box off that part of the source and label it clearly question 3, or you put a big bracket down the side of it. Something very physical and visual that makes you focus on the right part of the text. And then the main question, how does the writer use language to describe her excitement about Christmas? So if you didn't see the first couple of videos, this is the text that is the diary entry written by Kate Fry, and she's talking about her excitement about decorating her Christmas tree and putting presents underneath it and her family getting ready for Christmas Day. You might recognise this question because it's very similar to paper 1 question 2, and the strategies I'm going to give you are exactly the same. So in some ways this question's a bit of a gift because you're doing exactly the same skills as you've already shown in paper 1. And it should take you about 12 minutes. A 12-mark question, spend about 12 minutes on it. So our examiner's sitting in the bottom right-hand corner and she's waiting to show you this. A summary of how this question's going to be marked. So that bright green box at the top is where the highest marks are going to come from. So what the examiner would like to see from a student who's going to be getting the top marks, that they're analysing the effects of the writer's choices of language, that they select a judicious range of quotations, and they use a range of subject terminology appropriately. And that shouldn't scare you too much because this is what you've been preparing for since you were in primary school really. So you're analysing the effects of writer's choice of language. It's no good just telling us that you've spotted a particular technique or you've found a really good juicy quote unless you tell the examiner what the effect of the writer putting that quotation into the writing is. So what does the reader feel, think, predict, evaluate based on that particular quote? How does it change our experience as a reader? And if you don't explain that bit, you're throwing away the opportunity to get those top marks. You know by now that you need to include quotations in this kind of question, but notice that for the top mark it needs to be a range of quotations, so you won't get away with just using one. You need to select a range of quotations from within the selected lines, and a range of subject terminology. Now, this is a tricky one because you do need to be able to identify writers' techniques, but it isn't a competition about who knows the most fancy words that link to English, who knows the most terminology, but it does help if you know some. So if you can see a metaphor and you can name it as a metaphor, then that will help you. However, what's more important is that you can talk about the effect of that metaphor. So if a word escapes you in the exam, don't panic if you can't remember the name of it. If you instead explain where it is in the quotation and what the effect of it is, that's actually more important than how many words you've managed to learn before you go into that exam hall. So these are lines 1 to 8. So if you've not seen this text before, this is the section that you're being asked to write about. Wednesday, December the 22nd, 1897. We have bought 10 shillings worth of toys from Aunt Anne's charity bazaar for our tree. A fairy for the top, glass balls and birds, drums, trumpets and penny toys of all kinds and many more little things. Thursday, December the 23rd, 1897. Directly after lunch, Agnes and I started on the Christmas tree. It is such a beauty and touches the drawing room ceiling. We did up part of the presents, the principal ones in coloured papers. Just as we were in the midst of it, Constance and Katie, daughters of Aunt Agnes Gilby, arrived down. We just let them peep in the room, which was in a fine muddle. We allowed Mother in the room, but she didn't assist. But Daddy we couldn't allow in, much to his annoyance, really. The tree looks lovely. It ought to be a huge success. I have never seen one look nicer, and it is simply crammed with things. Now, when you look at an extract like this, and you might be wondering where to start, then there are 3 pictures that I offer to you and 3 questions that will help you get started. So you'll see the first picture is someone looking through a magnifying glass, and it links to this question: what is the writer showing us? The second question, how is the writer showing us this? That's the toolbox. So a writer's tools being things like using lots of positive language, maybe lots of adjectives that are positive and exciting, or maybe using a simile or using alliteration. And then we've got why, with this guy who's reading his book looking, I think he looks a little bit shocked perhaps by what he's reading, but why is the writer showing us this? How does the writer want us, the reader, to react, to think, to feel? So those 3 questions and those 3 pictures are there to help you think about what the important things you're being asked to do here are. Can you explain what's the writer showing us? How's the writer showing us this? Why is the writer showing us this? And if you remember those 3 pictures, it will help you when you're writing your response. So let's explain that with an example. So this is the extract. You can see I have highlighted some of my ideas about what I might put when I'm thinking about the what and the how, and thinking about how that might make me feel as a reader. So I've in different colours highlighted different parts of the text that I think link together. Now, if you think you can think like that, it's a good way of colour coding things, but if that sounds a little bit complicated, just going through and highlighting the quotes that you like, and then you'll see in pen, I've simply just quickly started to label, oh, I can see there's an adjective there that I might want to talk about, oh, I can see that's making me realise that children are in control, oh, I can see there's a list of details and that's implying enjoyment. So just get some of your ideas down on that exam paper first before you start writing, because that, a bit like warming up for a sporting match, it just gets your brain to start thinking about the key things you want to pull out of the text. And then when we look back at the question and you've got those highlights already, then you've immediately got somewhere to start, something you might want to say when you're talking about what the writer's showing us, how the writer's showing us this, and why the writer's showing us this. And I'm hoping that you're now, as we go through this model answer, you're going to see those 3 things happening all the time. And I've colour-coded the answer to try and help explain that. So where I've put something in red, I think I'm showing you what the writer's showing us. In blue, how the writer shows us, and in green, why the writer shows us this. I've also added a sneaky purple in there. When I'm using terminology, I'm putting that purple in as well. So let's have a look at how this might sound. The writer creates a sense of excitement about the preparations for Christmas using her diary to record her first-person experiences and impressions about the festivities. So there's my what the writer's showing us in red. On the 22nd of December, Fry uses a list of details to create a sense of the range of decorations she has bought. a fairy for the top, glass balls and birds, drums, trumpets and penny toys of all kinds, and many more little things. This list, and the idea that it doesn't even include everything, implies that she has enjoyed choosing the decorations, and links to her proud comment on the following day that the tree is simply crammed with things. Similarly, she describes her and Agnes as starting to decorate the tree directly after lunch, which suggests an impatience to get started. The reader can also infer from the description of the fine muddle of the room that the chaos and mess is welcomed and celebrated, rather than being a source of embarrassment or disorganisation. So in that second paragraph, you'll see there's quite a bit of blue in there. That's how the writer's showing us this. And the word that's in purple is just the word list. And that is an example of terminology. It might not sound like a particularly fancy word that you might have been learning in a revision list, but it is actually an example of being able to say what the writer's doing. In the red, we've got my evidence, so the quotations that I've pulled out. And then in green is where I think I'm trying to explain what the writer's trying to get the reader to feel, why the writer's showing us those particular ideas. So let's move on. The writer also uses positive language to describe the lovely looking tree, adding the superlative observation that she has never seen one look nicer. Emphasising her excitement around the appearance of the Christmas tree, she describes it as such a beauty, using the determiner, an abstract noun, to almost personify the tree as a something that stands out to be admired. The house seems busy with people, also anticipating Christmas, but only Fry and her sister are in charge of preparing the tree and presents. She is clearly proud to have the control over this and enjoys keeping it secret from the adults, with her dad not even allowed in and her cousins only allowed to peep into the room. So again, we've got the red, the quotations, we've got the blue with the how the writer's showing us this, the green, why is the writer showing us this, and then in purple, I've actually used a lot more sophisticated terminology there. We've got the determiner, abstract noun, personify, superlative. That's to challenge those of you who are lucky enough to be able to quickly pick up this kind of terminology and vocabulary. But if you're not, don't worry, because you'll see I've also used positive language, and that's just as powerful as being able to spot a superlative. So don't be intimidated by that. I'm trying to show all of you how you can answer this question and include some terminology. So here's my final little part of this answer. It's mostly green because I'm really focusing now on why the writer's showing us this. It is clear to the reader from all of the action described and the focus on the sensory pleasure Fry finds in the coloured paper and beautiful tree that she is excited to reveal the tree and presents to her family on Christmas Day and is confident about Christmas being a huge success. What I'd like you to notice there is that it's absolutely nailed back to the keywords in the question, which was how does the writer use language to describe her excitement about Christmas. I've made sure that I'm going back to that idea of excitement about Christmas when we get to that last paragraph, but also all the way through. Now, I would suggest it might be a good idea to pause the video at this point and read that a couple of times yourself so that really begins to make some sense. But what I'm hoping you can see is that for every idea I've applied the what, the how and the why, and if you can keep to that pattern, then you're going to be able to answer this question and answer it well. And that's the end of this video on question 3. The next video will be on question 4 in the reading paper. I hope that that's given you a strategy that you can apply to each answer and start practicing. Thanks for listening.